Hello, good evening. What's it? Sunday, 7th of June, 2026. 21:49. I thought I'd keep reading from Yoruba Legends by M.I. Ogomefu, and I'll start from the beginning. There's a preface. It says, "In modern times, we have begun paying close attention to folklore, old tales, not invented by one man, but belonging to the whole people, not written down, but told by parents to their children, and so handed on for hundreds of years. The legends and fairy stories in this book belong to the Yoruba country of southern Nigeria. They relate the adventures of men and animals, and try to explain the mysteries of nature, why women have long hair, how the leopard got his spots, and so forth. Most of them include very old songs, but these cannot here be given in full. We must not think that the stories are scientifically true. They grew out of the imagination of the people, and for actual proven facts we must look in our textbooks. We read these folk tales for their quaintness and humour, for their sympathy with nature, and because we find in them the ideas and ideals not just of one man, but of the race. The legends express primitive notions of right and wrong, and in this they fall below the new standard which Christianity has set for our actions. As a rule, however, the wicked are punished and the good rewarded, and that we feel is as it should be. We may weep at the death of rascally tortoise, but we feel that he deserves his fate." Great. The first story is called The Kingdom of the Yorubas. The ancient king Oduduwa had a great many grandchildren, and on his death he divided among them all his possessions. But his youngest grandson, Oranyan, was at that time away hunting, and when he returned home, he learnt that his brothers and cousins had inherited the old king's money, cattle, beads, native cloths, and crowns, but that to himself nothing was left but 21 pieces of iron, a cock, and some soil tied up in a rag. At that time, the whole earth was covered with water, on the surface of which the people lived. The resourceful Oranyan spread upon the water his pieces of iron, and upon the iron he placed a scrap of cloth, and upon the cloth the sail, and on the sail the cock. The cock scratched with his feet and scattered the soil far and wide, so that the ocean was partly filled up and islands appeared everywhere. The pieces of iron became the mineral wealth hidden under the ground. Now Oranyan's brothers and cousins all desired to live on the land, and Oranyan allowed them to do so on payment of tribute. He thus became king of all the Yorubas, and was rich and prosperous through his grandfather's inheritance. How tribal marks came to be used. A certain king named Sango sent two slaves to a distant country on an important mission. In due course they returned, and he found that one slave had achieved successfully what he had been sent to do, while the other had accomplished nothing. The king therefore rewarded the first with high honours, and commanded the second to receive 122 razor cuts all over his body. This was a severe punishment, but when the scars healed, they gave to the slave a very remarkable appearance, which greatly took the fancy of the king's wives. Sango therefore decided that cuts should in future be given, not as punishment, but as a sign of royalty, and he placed himself at once in the hands of the markers. However, he could only bear 2 cuts, and so from that day 2 cuts on the arm have been a sign of royalty, and various other cuts came to be marks of different tribes. That had me thinking of the Bible story of, what does he say? Yeah, the one with the talons, where the man has talons and he gives the talons to his servants before he goes on a trip. Next one is Akiti the Hunter. A famous hunter and wrestler named Akiti boasted that he was stronger than any other man or animal. He had easily overcome a giant, a leopard, a lion, a wolf, and a boa constrictor, and as nobody else opposed his claim, he called himself the King of the Forest. Wherever he went, he sang his triumphant wrestling song, and everyone feared and respected him. But he had forgotten the elephant, who is a very wise animal and knows many charms. One day, the elephant challenged him and declared that he had no right to call himself king, as the elephant himself was a monarch of the forest and could not be defeated. Akiti thereupon flung his spear at his enemy, but because of the elephant's charm, the weapon glanced off his hide and did him no harm. Akiti next tried his bow and poisoned arrows and his hunting knife, but still without effect. However, the hunter also possessed a charm, and by using it, he changed himself into a lion and flew at the elephant, but the elephant flung him off. Next, he became a serpent, but he could not succeed in crushing the elephant to death. At last, he changed himself into a fly and flew into the elephant's large flapping ear. He went right down inside until he came to the heart, and then he changed himself into a man again and cut up the heart with his hunting knife. At last the elephant fell dead, and Akiti stepped out of his body in triumph, for he was now without question the king of the forest. Son of Sticks. A great king sent his various sons to rule over different parts of his kingdom, and all were satisfied but one, the youngest and most ambitious, who returned to his father after some time with the complaint that his territory was much too small and his subjects too few. The king was displeased with his son and sent for a large bundle of sticks, which he converted into human beings. "Here are some more subjects for you," he said to the astonished prince. From that time, the tribe was famous for its strength and stupidity and went by the nickname of Sons of Sticks or Omiyigi. Let's see the next one. I'm going to try to read up to where I was yesterday, which was page 12. Okay, this is page 6. Why women have long hair. Two women quarrelled, and one of them went out secretly at night and dug a deep pit in the middle of the path leading from her enemy's house to the village well. Early next morning, when all were going to the well for water with jars balanced on their heads, this woman fell into the pit and cried loudly for help. Her friends ran to her and, seizing her by the hair, began to pull her out of the pit. To their surprise, her hair stretched as they pulled, and by the time she was safely on the path, her hair was as long as a man's arm. This made her very much ashamed, and she ran away and hid herself. But after a while she realized that her long hair was beautiful, and then she felt very proud and scorned all the short-haired women, jeering at them. When they saw this, they were consumed with jealousy and began to be ashamed of their short hair. "We have men's hair," they said to one another. "How beautiful it would be to have long hair." So one by one they jumped into the pit, and their friends pulled them out by the hair. And in this way they, and all women after them, had long hair. Another short one. Why people cry, "Long live the king," when thunder follows lightning. King Sango was acquainted with many deadly charms, and he once happened to discover a preparation by which he could attract lightning. He foolishly decided to try the effect of the charm first of all on his own palace, which was at the foot of a hill. Ascending the hill with his courtiers, the king employed the charm. A storm suddenly arose. The palace was struck by lightning and burnt to the ground, together with Sango's whole family. Overcome with grief at having lost his possessions, and above all his sons, the impetuous king resolved to retire to a corner of his kingdom and to rule no more. Some of his courtiers agreed with him, and others tried to dissuade him from the plan, but Sango in his rage executed 160 of them, 80 who had disagreed with him, and 80 who had agreed too eagerly. Then, accompanied by a few friends, he left the palace and started on his long journey. One by one his friends deserted him on the way, until he was left alone, and in despair he decided to put an end to his life, which he rashly did. When they heard of the deed, his people came to the spot and gave him an honourable funeral, and he was ever afterward worshipped as a god of thunder and lightning. So among all the Yorubas, when people see the flash of lightning followed by the sullen roar of thunder, they remember Sango's rage after the destruction of his palace and exclaim, "Long live the king." We have a 13. Okay, that's a long way. Oh, it's 10 minutes. It's almost 10 minutes. I'll read one more. This is called The Olofin and the Mice. A famous Olofin, or Yoruba king, was once imprisoned by his enemies in a hut without any door or roof opening and left to die of starvation. As he sat gloomily on the ground, the Olofin saw a little mouse running across the hut. He seized his knife, exclaiming, "Rather than die of hunger, I will eat this mouse." But on second thoughts, he put away his knife, saying, "Why should I kill the mouse? I shall starve later on just the same." To his surprise, the mouse addressed him in the following words: "Noble king, greetings to you on your generosity. You have spared my life, and in return I will spare yours." The mouse then disappeared into a hole in the ground and returned some time afterwards, followed by 20 or 30 other mice, all bearing grains of corn, garri, and small fruits. For 5 days they fed him in this manner, and on the 6th day the hut was opened by the Olofin's captors, who were astonished to find him still alive and in good health. "This Olofin must have a powerful charm," they declared. "It appears that he can live without eating or drinking." Thereupon they released him, gave him a war canoe, and let him return in freedom to his own country. There we go. Thanks for listening.